All right, Bart, what do you think, looking back on this season, has been the biggest factor? Is there one thing you can point to why this has been such a disappointing season for the Steelers?
Well, I think the distraction of Le'Veon Bell, his contract, them not getting him signed, them believing that Connor had early success, not understanding and appreciating what Le'Veon Bell brought to them, his stability at the position. I believe the best back in the game, even still with Todd Gurley, no disrespect to Saquon Barkley, but he started this stuff. He started this barbecue stuff, to quote Pops. But, when you look at it, I think also that, they're 0-4 against the AFC West. And you look at how can you be 0-4 against the AFC West? They didn't travel well this year. And also, not to be understated, the loss of Ryan Shazier. In that type of defense, you need an alpha, you need a dog at the middle linebacker position. And I just don't believe in Bostic and Williams. And then they have bad safety play. So you think about when you want to be an attacking style defense, you think about what used to be in that division. Ed Reed, you think about Palomalu, you think about Ferry, you think about Ray Lewis. You need impact players at that position. They don't have that, so now they have to do it with smoke and mirrors. They leave guys on islands, and they're just not prepared to make those type of plays.
They're the 31st running team in football. I mean, C's talked about it and probably will again, like what a disproportionate number of times they're passing versus running the ball. It was similar to what the Vikings were doing. Vikings offensive coordinator got fired because of it. If they had one more win, they would be in control of their own destiny going into Week 17.
And they would still, in my opinion, be having a very disappointing season, which they have had the last several seasons.
For sure. But like last year, I don't think you thought it was disappointing.
I told you before the season they weren't going to end the way the Steelers wanted because they had too many dysfunctions on the team. So it did end in a disappointment like I predicted.
No, last year it ended, but last year during the year, 13-3, I don't think, at least I wouldn't have considered that a disappointment. Last year it was disappointing because
if they start giving out trophies at the end of the regular season, they had a great one. Sure. Lombardi Trophy regular season.
Your big point is, I think, that that the Steelers, it's about Super Bowl appearances, and with Bell, Big Ben, and Brown, they've never been there.
Well, what have they won?
Right. They've never won. The closest they came was the AFC Championship game a couple years ago. They couldn't beat New England. Last year, they couldn't even get back there. But I do think it starts with Le'Veon Bell. The point I was making is that if they had won one more game, they'd be in first in the division. If they had two more wins, they'd be on pace to have a bye, which maybe it would still have been underachieving, but it wouldn't be a disaster. This is a potential disaster of a season because at the beginning of the year, they were unsettled at that position. They go 1-2-1 to start this season, and then late in the year, they blow games, a 16-point lead at home against the Chargers, a game against the Raiders that they have no business blowing. Why? Because they can't ice it away on the ground with a running back. Like I do think you can't replace elite players at any spot, even if you have really good players behind them. Le'Veon Bell is an elite player. They made the decision. We didn't want to extend him, understood it.
They gambled incorrectly.
They gambled, and then he's gambling as well. We'll see how his gamble pays out, but they never thought they weren't going to have him for any games this year. They thought by this time we were going to have him back. They didn't, and it really hurt them.
And then they probably bought in a little too much to what James Conner was doing, thinking he could be a very equal replacement for what they had, or at least close to it, to Lev Bell.
Well, they didn't have a chance to adjust to James Conner. So James Conner, what he was going to do was part of the after effect of not being able to sign L. Bell to a contract extension.
Because once the season started, they couldn't have given him an extension.
Yeah, and the biggest problem with that is where all that money go? What did they do with that money? You could have signed several good players if you knew that, okay, he's not going to be here. No, they had allocated that money, set it aside for him. Right. So now the guy doesn't show up. They don't go out and they weren't like the NBA. They went out and said, I'm going to get a big, I'm going to get a salary cap exemption. I'm going to go out and get me a shooting guard. No, they just said, we're good enough to be able to continue. So they adopted a philosophy that as far as throwing the ball, and I believe that once they saw that L. Bell wasn't going to be there, they're going to be dominated by the passing game. They had tremendous expectation on James Washington, the young wide receiver, to add him to Juju and Antonio, to think that they could have an elite wide receiving core and we're going to throw the ball. Now, they have thrown the ball as far as teams that we've seen since the modern day era, since the merger. Like, they've thrown, historic rate. You talk about the Vikings. There's only 6 teams since the merger that have thrown the ball run the ball less than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if you look at not only since the merger, but our recent history with teams that have tried to do this. Drew Brees tried to do this a couple years ago. Not successful. Flacco did it, Phillip Rivers, and Drew Brees again. None of these teams won more than 8 games. So the philosophy the Pittsburgh Steelers adopted that we're going to be a dominant by our quarterback and our wide receivers, it's not a winning philosophy. And it's definitely not a Pittsburgh Steelers style. Where you play, the stadium you play in on that field, it's not a style that I think you can win championship football with.
Well, it's not complimentary to who they are and being able to, be able to hide some of the deficiencies that they have on the defensive side of the ball. They can't salt the game away. And you think about, Big Ben, this is why numbers lie, right? Because when you look at him, he's on pace to throw for over 5,000 yards, but that's not good. They need balance, and that's what Le'Veon Bell provided for them, balance. And, even not just so much the runs as well, but also the screens and the draws, which are pretty much like the short passing game, giving them ability to keep defenses off balance. Whenever Ben's throwing for over 40 times a game, it's never a good thing.
Those 5,000-yard seasons are not good for teams. Like when Matt Stafford was doing it, when Drew Brees was doing it, it was on bad or mediocre football teams. Like this year, there might be an exception if Pat Mahomes gets there for the Chiefs. But even that team, part of that's because the defense is so bad, they got to be throwing the football.
And if they don't get to the Super Bowl, it's going to be because they can't run the ball. They can't eat up the clock.
Bart, if the Steelers lose this weekend, do you think it's on the board that they make a coaching change in Pittsburgh?
People always want to make changes, and you have to understand who the organization you're talking about. This is a team that's always been, stable. I think they only had 3 head coaches from Noel to Coward now to Tomlin, right, in 50 years. So, and you have to ask yourself, if you don't have Mike Tomlin, then who? Who's out there? Who's the candidate? McCarthy? Who you want to bring in there? There's nobody really out there that can replace him. It'll be a line around the block for Mike Tomlin then as a coach. What I appreciate about Tomlin is he always owns it. I don't always agree with some of the decisions. We think about the fake punt last week. He's made some questionable decisions. He's gambled and lost, but he did win, and he has had this team in the running for the playoffs or close to it for a championship every single year of his career.
See, who would be the 3 happiest teams if Mike Tomlin got fired?
Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Cleveland. If they fire him, go to Cleveland with Baker Mayfield and be a nightmare for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Bart, thanks so much for hanging out.
It's a pleasure. Got no life.
Love it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.